Hi guys, this will be episode 5. Hadn't intended to go to an episode 5 for this little Chicco car, but I might as well. In the previous episodes we actually managed to, I'll say kill the gearbox. I think it's got some sort of protective clutch ratchet type thing in there that is now slipping because I've been giving it too much forwards and backwards. The problem is you can't just undo these screws and lift the gearbox out, because you need to get the wheels off, because the axle has to come up through these slots, and with the wheels in place you can't lift it up. But the wheels are actually pressed onto the shafts. The shafts have got ribs on them that stop the wheels coming off again, and well, there isn't an easy way to do it. You'd need some sort of sprocket puller. You probably have to drill a hole in the end there, put the end of the sprocket puller in there, the claws behind it, and try and pull it off the axle. So the other option is to actually cut the wheel arches off so we can just lift it straight up. And that's what I'm going to do. I have to cut the wheel arches across here, across there, across there, on both sides with everything in position so that we can just lift it out. I don't know if I mentioned in the previous video, the ESC, I wired the on-off switch so it goes down to the on-off switch down there, so it was all using the existing facilities. Anyway, hacksaw, saw, cut, and we should be able to get it off. In fact, I did the opposite to what I just said. I think I said saw, cut, where in fact I've used the saw that way, and across this way I should probably try and get away with these. Yeah. So now I might need to go back just a little bit further so we can just lift this straight up that way. Because looking at that, it might clear or it might still get caught. So I'll trim that a little bit more, and I'll do the same on the other side. Right, that's cleared the wheel arches out the way. Okay, so we're free, but that ESC is clear. Right, one thing people have asked me about in the past when I've talked about these sort of cars is, why don't you undo the screws there and take the wheel apart? There must be something on the inside that allows you to unscrew the axle. Well, the answer is no. I've undone that so I can demonstrate. It releases the inside of the wheel, which is no use to you whatsoever, bearing in mind you can't get to the inside. But even with the inside disconnected, there's nothing there to disconnect that part of the wheel from the axle. I suspect it might even be hot, moulded in place. You know, they push it on while it's still warm, so it moves over the ribs on the axle. You can try heating it to get it off. I have done that with other similar toys with some success, but obviously because it's still in the car when you're trying to do that. Oh, my batteries have just finished charging. Yeah, because it's still inside the car when you're trying to do that, you'd have to boil the whole car. You can't just get the wheel in. You'd have to actually immerse it all in boiling water. So it's not a practical solution trying to heat it. Might be able to heat it now, might be able to get it off now, but we probably don't need to. Probably, I say, because to get to the gearbox we've still got to undo these screws that are in the way, or the wheel is in the way. Clearly what they do is they put the axle in the car without the wheels on, and then they push the wheels on from outside. I don't know if I can undo those screws with this screwdriver. It used to be a longer screwdriver or thinner. Well, I managed to get that one off with just brute force. So that saved having to boil it. So just to show you, that goes on there, screws in there, and the tyre has a little notch in it, so it goes in into that notch, so it's held in place. Notch in the same place, yeah. Right, well, now we've got it apart, we'll have a look at the gearbox and find out what's making the horrible noise. Somewhere in my junk box I've got an identical gearbox, so I have taken a similar one apart. But I had a little look just now and I couldn't find it. So I might have to have a harder look, depending on what's broken inside, whether it's replaceable. So I'm hoping it's a sort of ratchety thing. Don't see any ratchety thing, although that's spring loaded. Right. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything broken. It goes that way round, so that has got to be in there like that. I don't, as I say, I don't see anything broken. It's almost like this might have popped out of its bearing, out of its, yeah. I better clean that muck, dust I've got in there off it again. Yeah, can't find anything wrong with it now that I've taken it apart and put it back together. So the only thing I can think is that spring-loaded bit had somehow popped out of its seat. Right, well, we've got it all back up together, or at least got gearbox back together. Got it plugged back into the ESC. Seems absolutely fine. The only thing I can imagine is that spring-loaded gear had somehow become displaced, and that was it. It wasn't making contact, or wasn't meshing properly. But those gears all look fine. And now that I've taken it apart and put it back together, it sounds fine. So we'll put it back in place. Something else I've just noticed, which I haven't noticed before, with those screws taken out from the inside, this cover has come off, and we would be able to grip this and tap through the end of the shaft. I was envisaging having to drill a hole there, but with that out the way, we can actually get to the end. So that's something I haven't found before. Well, that's disappointing. As soon as I put the wheels back on and gave it another try, something is slipping again. Let's see if I can get this one off with brute force again. Right, so we haven't fixed it. Let's get all that dust out of the way. How have we not fixed it? And why is it all right in reverse and not in forwards? It's not that gear. That gear is absolutely rigid on there. I expect the reason it works in reverse and not forwards is just that in one direction it will be the net effect of the gears will be pushing it out of position, and in the other direction it's pulling it in. I'm going to cut out an awful lot of this video that I've already shot because I finally got to the culprit of what's making the noise. This gear here, which I thought was a one piece, is two pieces with a what can we call it? A strain relief, or it's got a ratchet on it. And it's easiest if I grip it like this and turn it, and you'll see. That's where our noise is coming from. It's not broken teeth or anything like that. This is designed to slip, but somehow or other we're causing it to slip too easily. The only thing I did notice was this end had actually got a layer of blue plastic on it, as if it had actually been spinning and melting into the casing somehow, and that may have reduced the tension, possibly, I don't know. Right, I'm just holding the gearbox together, and as soon as we've got the extra flywheel effect of the wheels, you can hear it, that's slipping. fact, if I use the control, and that stops the gears braking, but it's actually no good to us because it's slipping. The only fix I can think of coming up with is possibly tapping these metal end plates in a bit to tighten up the spring. We're only talking a tiny bit of movement. I don't know if I can do that. I'm looking on this end of this shaft and it's clearly got some knurling on it. I don't know if you can actually see that. So I'm wondering if this, like a thick washer, whether that can be tapped on a little bit further to increase the pressure. I'll give that a try. Well, I don't want to preempt anything, but that does seem to have tightened it up. So I put my finger on it to add some pressure. I think we've done it. Well, that was interesting. I've never done that before. Well, I'm afraid it's good news, bad news. Always seems to be. Yeah, got it all back together. Had it running for a little while, and then it started slipping again. So I think that was the fix, but it slipped again. So unless I can find my other gearbox that's the same and possibly swap that gear out, I think we're stuck. I'm quite disappointed, to be honest, because having gone all the way through that, taken it apart, found it and fixed it, I was hoping it'd last, but it didn't. Shame. Disappointing. I was briefly hoping that wasn't the end of the story, because I've searched through my junk pile and found the gearbox that I could remember, which I thought was going to be exactly the same. It isn't. This one comes out of another Chicco toy car, which has got hot glue on it because I've used it in something else. I think this one was called Billy Big Wheels, and it has the same type of wheels on it. You have to get inside to undo the screws to get it apart. But if I do the same with it, if I overpower it, you can hear that clutch is slipping as well. So normal power, no problem. Do it too hard and it slips. Whether it looks identical to the one that's in there, I really don't know, and I really don't know if it's worth bothering. I can imagine that I'll get this apart, swap them over, and there'll be no difference. I mean, it is designed to do that, to relieve the stress so that you don't break the gears. The only other thing I could do, just sort of thinking it aloud, take that gear out and stick a hot soldering iron on it or something and actually lock it solid, melt it together. So that would stop it slipping. And then we get the other gears break. That was disappointing. I was hoping that was the same, but it's not. Oh, I also found that, which is from a completely different car, but it works the same way. You push it together and there's the ridged edge on the inside, so you can but that wouldn't fit. It's completely different. Well, I'm thinking this through and I've decided I've got nothing to lose really. I've now pulled this gear apart so we can actually see it clearly, the two pieces. I've pulled the end piece off. In fact, the spring disappeared somewhere. I've no idea where that went. So what I'm thinking of doing is either putting some washers on there to space it, or even a little bit of plastic tubing would probably do the job to stop it coming apart. Or, as I said, heat it up with soldering iron or something and actually seal it, because they're nylon and there's no point in trying to glue them. That won't work. I really should have given up long ago. I've just tried putting a piece of plastic in the gear there to replace the spring, so it forces it to stay in place, and I can still make it slip. So I could take it apart again and do what I was thinking of doing, which is use the soldering iron to try and melt it together so it can't move. Running out of options really. Well, as long as I'm not too violent with it, forwards, backwards, it does work. But if I put my finger on it to hold it, that's clearly something slipping. It might be the gear on the actual axle. I don't think it is. I think it's just, well, because it could be the pinion gear. And that's better than it was, but not much better. I really ought to give up. Spending far too much time on this. What I've done is I've used a piece of worm gear which happens to have the right inside diameter. I've cut that to length so that this gear cannot spring apart. So it can't act as a clutch mechanism now, it's fixed. So we'll put that back in there, put it all back together and see what happens. I really should have given up on this, but I just cannot see what's wrong with it. If I hold the gears in place, and yet as soon as I put it together, it screams. And it's not my fixed gear that's screaming. I don't know what is screaming, unless this whole piece is coming out of alignment in there, but I can't see how it can. I mean, that's pretty solid. There's no movement there. and yet somehow it's moving enough for it to come out of alignment. I don't know how it's doing it. I cannot figure it out. I would have given up ages ago if I could have figured it out. If I could see what was wrong with it. But it all seems absolutely perfect. And then we get that noise. Now put some resistance on it. Something is slipping in there and I cannot figure out what. And it's almost as if that's coming out of alignment somehow. Because when I pull it apart, it all comes apart and you can't tell. I wonder if that's just slipping out of the slot there.
Thanks for watching. You'll find more information down in the video description. You might like to watch that video up there. And you might like to subscribe over there.